Hello, Duncan here from Video Mania 2, and today we're going to remember and pay tribute to the great Chuck Norris. I woke up Friday morning to a text message from one of my best friends, and he gave me the news that Chuck Norris was gone. And I couldn't believe it, and I Googled it immediately, and it was true, and I just couldn't believe it. I was going to make a video earlier, but I had contractors at the house, so it's been kind of noisy around here, so I haven't been able to do it. Also, I wanted to gather my thoughts about this because he had such a profound impact on my childhood and so many other people in my generation, especially people in my generation, 80s and 90s. He was in so many great films, action martial arts films, and he was also had a profound impact on 90s television with Walker, Texas Ranger, which I'll talk about later. He did so much for the martial arts community, too. He transcended all these things where everyone knew Chuck Norris was. People that didn't keep up with karate or martial arts, they knew Chuck Norris was. People that didn't follow action movies or martial arts movies, they knew Chuck Norris was. I mean, he was that big. He did so much. He was part of American culture, for sure. Chuck Norris started out, he was in the Air Force, and he was stationed in South Korea where he first discovered martial arts. And the first discipline he studied, I believe, was Tang Soo Do, and he earned a black belt in that. And he said he was not the most athletic or strongest guy growing up, but he found something that he excelled at, and martial arts was that, and it gave him so much. And so he wanted to use martial arts to give back to the world, and he spent the rest of his life doing that. He first burst into mainstream consciousness with a fight scene in The Way of the Dragon with the iconic Bruce Lee, who them together, they really brought martial arts on film to the world. Bruce Lee with Enter the Dragon, and then in The Way of the Dragon, they staged this fight. And Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris were friends, so they put this fight together, and they just went at it. And it was so huge for its time, what it did and what could be done with martial arts on film. These two icons that were so skilled and disciplined brought this to the screen with the Coliseum as a background. It was perfect to introduce the world more to martial arts. And Chuck Norris went on from there. He was still an instructor, and he competed in martial arts. He was a multi-time, 6-time, I believe, karate champion. I mean, he was great. And as he stepped away from martial arts competition, he was an instructor, and he instructed Hollywood icon Steve McQueen. And Steve McQueen suggested that he give Hollywood a try, give acting a shot. And he did, and I think he started out with movies like Good Guys Wear Black and Breaker Breaker, which were successful. They were smaller movies, but then it brought him more into the consciousness. And I'm going to talk about some of my favorite movies with Chuck Norris. And then I'm going to talk about Walker, Texas Ranger as well. The thing that was great about Chuck Norris, while I wrap up his martial arts background, even when in the 80s, when he was a star, he always had this humility about him and this approachability about him. He was larger than life, but he seemed yet approachable with his persona. And one thing about that is he met Rickson Gracie from the legendary Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family, because he kept hearing, he was a karate icon. He kept hearing about this jiu-jitsu in Brazil. And I saw an interview with him. He's saying, you got to see what the Gracies are doing. So he went down there and humbled himself and realized, I better learn this. And he did, and earned a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. I wanted to touch on that. Now, we will get into his movies. These are some of my favorites. I have a good bit in my collection from him, obviously. I enjoy the missing in action films. It's been a while since I've watched them. If they get put out on 4K, I'll definitely pick them up. But I did enjoy them a while back when I watched it. So I'll have to revisit those for sure. But here are some of my favorites with him. The first one, and I'm going to kind of do this chronologically, and I'll close it out with my favorite Chuck Norris movie. The first one is The Octagon. Here, he has to take on some ninjas that were, he was adopted by a family, and he had an adopted brother that from a family he was adopted into, and there was jealousy there, and he has to confront his past and take on these ninjas. And this came out in 1980. This is maybe the first full-length Chuck Norris movie I watched, and I really enjoyed it. And this first one, I revisit this a lot, actually. The next one, this used to come on TBS all the time. They used to run Chuck Norris movies all the time, so that's how I first was introduced to him in a lot of ways. This is Eye for an Eye. It also stars Mako and Richard Roundtree and Christopher Lee. Here he's a San Francisco cop that gets fed up with the system, and after his friend is murdered, he wants to take down a drug cartel in San Francisco, and he uses his martial arts to help him do that and weed out police corruption. But I revisited this recently, so it's a movie I enjoy a lot from him. The next one takes place in Chicago. He's a Chicago cop. It's Code of Silence, directed by Andrew Davis, who went on to do Under Siege and The Fugitive. A great director, but this movie is great here. Chuck Norris's characters all have this code they follow, and the Code of Silence is he spoke out against a fellow police officer who he feels is not up to the job and who's had mental problems and potentially substance abuse problems, and his mistakes are costing lives, and he spoke out against him. And he stood on his ground, and other cops kind of shun him. And so he has to still help a girl out that's in trouble. And, he doesn't have the whole police force at his back because of what he stood for. So it's about following his principles and what he believes in. And that's what he does in Code of Silence. That's a great movie. Next one, this one's a little darker. He was a staple of Cannon Films. This was from the legendary Cannon Group. This is The Hitman. Here he plays Grogan. He was a cop who was betrayed by his partner, and he almost dies, but there's people that kept him alive, and they wanted him to stay dead so he can go undercover to the mob and take down everybody. And he does, and here he's a lot, takes a darker path, and he's not as nice here. But he still knows he's undercover, and also part of the Chuck Norris staple of helping out the little guy and being a hero. Even though this is his darkest character, most of his characters, he's a hero that, where he stands. Here, there's a little kid next door who's being bullied and picked on because the kid's picking on him because he's not white. And the kid who's the bully's father is encouraging him to be racist because he's a racist. And Grogan sees that, and he sees the kid and tells him a story about him growing up and being picked on and how people are different and what they're afraid of. And he teaches him to defend himself a little bit. And he takes time out of the undercover work to do that. And that was that positive scenario that Chuck Norris liked to incorporate in his movies. And he teaches that kid to defend himself. And the racist father, he goes and punches through the screen door and knocks him out like he deserves. So, and this is a good movie to visit if you're in the mood for a Cannon film. For Chuck Norris is one of his better ones. The next movie, a lot of people, a generation behind me, The Karate Kid was before their time, but a movie that was for them, Sidekicks. The late Jonathan Brandis plays this kid who's being bullied and picked on and doesn't believe in himself, and he's kind of frail. And Chuck Norris, he idolizes Chuck Norris, the man. And when he has dreams or daydreams, he reenacts scenes from The Hitman and Missing in Action and other Chuck Norris's iconic films. And he ends up getting to meet the real Chuck Norris and learning from him and learning to believe himself and overcome his obstacles. And this movie is great. I really like it. When Vinegar Syndrome announced this a couple years back, I picked it up immediately. Next was the final movie released by Cannon Films, and it's only fitting that Chuck Norris was the star of it. It's this action horror hybrid. This movie is crazy. It's called Hellbound. Here he plays a Chicago cop who has to take on the emissary of Satan, and he has to saved the world this time. And this movie was crazy like only Canon Films could make them, and it's a ton of fun. I love it. I watch it every summer because I have such a blast with it. Another movie. This was his last feature film where he was the lead. It is The Cutter. It came out in 2006, and by this time Chuck Norris was in his mid-60s, so here he plays a private detective, a more mature role for him at this point. And this movie, it also stars Daniel Bernhardt, so he has some great fight scenes with him. He still kicks ass, and it's a great movie that he has to rescue a kidnapped diamond cutter who's tied into a bigger conspiracy. And he has some great scenes with Daniel Bernhardt, and this character was great for him at this point in his career, like I said. This movie's a lot of fun. Doesn't get talked about as many other Chuck Norris's movies. The last one, he has a kind of extended cameo in this. It is Expendables 2, which is my favorite in this franchise. And here he has a great cameo, and he throws in a Chuck Norris joke about the cobra biting him, and Stallone's character asks him, Barney Ross, he asks him, is it true a cobra bit you? And he's like, yep, and after 5 agonizing days, the cobra died. Chuck Norris was good about rolling with, humor and the memes of what he was part of. And now for my favorite movie of his, The Delta Force, with Lee Marvin and also the great Steve James. It's directed by Menachem Golan, who was partnered with his cousin Yoram Globus for the Cannon Group. This was an action epic. He was part of the Delta Force that rescues hostages from an airplane. They take on the bad guys. He has a motorcycle with rockets and missiles and machine guns. It's the ultimate 80s action movie, and I love it. And I revisit it every July where it takes place, and for sure this year I definitely will be. But the Delta Force came on TBS a lot, and I enjoyed it so much. Great film. Then we have, in the early 90s, the action star wasn't the ultimate box office draw it once was, and Chuck Norris, with the humility he always had, he had been offered television shows before but turned them down, but then he was offered a role of Cordell Walker in Walker, Texas Ranger, and he liked the premise, and Cordell Walker had that code of honor that Chuck Norris liked, and Chuck Norris went with it. And in the 90s, when television was still very huge before the age of streaming, Walker was a huge show in the 90s, very successful, and he transitioned from the 80s to the 90s and stayed in the mainstream consciousness. Like, now everybody knew him because of Walker, another generation of people. And I remember Saturday night, I was a kid in South Carolina, and I didn't have as many friends, and I wasn't always out. So on Saturday nights, you better believe 10 o'clock, I was watching Walker, and so were a lot of other people. And the show was a very positive one, and Cordell Walker wanted to be a positive influence and kick ass, and he had a sense of justice, and all Chuck Norris's characters had this code that they followed, and that was definitely true here. And it lasted for 9 seasons, and he made, had great success with it. So, and I remember even as I was getting older, I was at a college dorm, my college dorm, and Saturday night, I've had trouble with a girl, our relationship was falling apart, and I was kind of depressed, and one night I just didn't feel like going out to the latest party on campus, and I was back in my dorm on a Saturday night, and I was like, I put on Walker, and there was this, had a positive message, and it felt good, because I was going through some personal problems at that time, and to sit down and watch something positive, and Chuck Norris was at the forefront of it. He always wanted to mentor younger people and teach them a better way of life and the better path, and just had such a positive, upbeat attitude, and was so active even in his last days. He did so much for so many people, and the humility he had. I'm seeing countless stories. Van Damme posted a picture and said how when he was struggling to get going, how no one would give him the time of day, but Chuck Norris did. He could hold the pads for Chuck Norris and spar with him some, and Chuck Norris encouraged him. And even the karate schools, he would visit all over, even after he was a mega star, he would still visit, schools and, keep the encouragement going. That's just how positive he was. So the world really lost something, and people in my generation really lost something a few days ago, and it's very sad, but he had a long life and did so much, and we will always remember him from Walker, Texas Ranger, and all these amazing films that he made, and he did so much. So I'm grateful that this world had Chuck Norris, and I'm grateful I had a childhood with him in it, and so many other people in my generation feel the same way. So condolences to his family and his friends and fans all over. So thank you for sticking with me this long, and take care till next time.